Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. We got an action-packed show for you guys today. We're going to kick it off with high tempo. Matt, what do you got for us?
Probably the most insane thing that I've seen about ever. Mike Trout and the LA Angels apparently were smoking too much pot and agreed to a $430 million contract over 12 years. Absolutely insane. I couldn't imagine sitting in the room and saying, yeah, we're going to pay him $430 million to play baseball over 12 years, guaranteed contract, and then if he goes out and stubs his toe, he's still getting paid. It's like the stupidest thing. I'd have it written in his contract that if he's injured, he's ripping tickets, selling beers at the concession stand. He's doing something for $430 million. He's going to be like my personal chaperone. Insane. I couldn't fathom. I don't know of any baseball player that I'd be willing to pay $430 million. What could you possibly contribute for that much money? What do you think?
That's $500 million almost. I thought that it was crazy they went 12 years. I understand that they're trying to lock him up. Almost, I mean, who's the last guy that played his entire career with one team, really, at that level? Was it Chipper Jones? I mean, most guys jump teams, and they're hedging their bets, saying that, hey, he's going to go out there, and we'll see. We'll see if he can get to that level of consistency. I think Cabrera right now, and I know people are going to say Bryce Harper is his comparison, but Cabrera had the Triple Crown. I don't think Trout has ever done that. And to me, that's the level you're trying to reach. Are you going to have legendary statistics like that? Sure, he competes great now, but there's a huge drop off around age 30. If he hits that, it's going to be all downhill. I mean, I understand what they're doing. They're hoping to keep him around, but really, realistically, if you look at Chipper Jones, how much publicity does he give the Braves now that he's retired? He had the Hall of Fame induction. He comes back every once in a while, and it's great to have. This is almost like they're afraid the Yankees were going to poach him, and he was going to go in Cooperstown as a Yankee.
I guess the part that I find frustrating with the whole thing is this is the same franchise that spent a gazillion dollars to snatch up Albert Pujols a couple years ago when he was in free agency. And for as big of a bat, for as great of a defender as Pujols was, didn't give him a ring, didn't help him. And that's the point that I make, is that you throw all that money at one guy, and I give St. Louis a little bit of credit because they realized, I'm not going to tie up. I agreed with when they let him walk. For as good as what he was, he's not worth tying up your entire payroll. You could probably pay the Pirates 3 times over with that salary.
Yeah, I mean, you hear from some teams that they can't afford big contracts. Major League Baseball brought in a record $10 billion worth of revenue last year. I think it was something crazy like that. So what are you going to do? I mean, it's not like they're already not going to the stadiums. We have a story on that later about the fake attendance reporting. I mean, like, who's going to stop them? You're getting the TV deals. That's where the money's at. They have the streaming deal in place now with MLB TV. As long as people are paying to watch the sport, the salaries are going to keep growing. It hasn't really reached the tipping point in baseball because they don't have the salary cap. And to be honest, I like the salary cap from a competitive standpoint, but then you really don't know in these other sports how much players really are worth. And I think that's the question that, looking at this, you can answer in baseball. Like, holy crap, Trout was worth a ton of money. Like, I wouldn't pay him that. And I'm surprised he's getting that just from one baseball team, but they must think that he's worth it. Speaking of big contracts, my high tempo, we speculated last week on where Bell was going to sign. Of course, as soon as the show is over, or it might have even been during the show. He starts tweeting out about being in green, and he signs with the Jets. So, obviously, he had his decision made, and it wasn't a decision that everyone looked high on because he missed out on a ton of money, and he took a worse deal than what he had with the Steelers, and he's on a worse situation. It's like a triple strike against him. I don't know what he was doing. We called it. As soon as Connor started to have the stats, you knew that he wasn't going to get the big contract. What do you think of that decision? Did he end up where you thought he was going to end up? I know you said Ravens. They got Ingram, which I think might be a better fit.
I agree. And I think that potentially swayed some of the deal. I'm not so. I am, to be honest, a little bit surprised that he signed that deal, and I don't know. I would be curious to see what Pittsburgh was willing to put on the table, knowing that the deal that they had offered him before his franchise, before they decided to tag him, was going to be more than what the Jets signed. So, I mean, he ended up signing the deal with the Jets, claiming that it was about money, but then hurt himself. Like, he hurt his ability to make more money because not only did he lose the full season of playing with pay, but he also signed a contract that dollars-wise was less. So he lost on all accounts, and he went to a team that is a legit dumpster fire. So I don't know what pieces he has that could benefit him. He's going to go there, and I'll be surprised if he makes it through the first 8 weeks of the season without tweaking a hamstring or groin and being done and missing some significant playing time.
It's going to come down to, are they even in contention? And then do they risk getting him hurt? It just doesn't make sense. I mean, you had a situation in Pittsburgh. You could have came back. He said that he was worried about coming back. He thought about it multiple times, but he was just worried about getting hurt. I think that was an interview that I saw today or yesterday where he said he would get sick, physically sick, thinking about the possibility of getting hurt.
I don't know. To me, that it was a selfish move. I think with the way that he handled that whole situation, it was handled so poorly that it almost set himself up that he couldn't come back. And then he ended up having to take this lesser deal. And I think it just, in the long run, hurts him. And I saw a thing that was saying that he was worried that he has to get back into, like, he's in good shape, but he's not in playing shape. So I wonder, what does that mean going forward as he's getting back into stuff with the team? How long is that going to take to get him back into playing speed? And how is that going to affect his transition back onto the field?
It took him a few times, a couple weeks last time, 2 years ago. So, and he sat out the whole year. I mean, I don't know. If you're a Jets fan, I don't see how you can be excited about that deal. But I forgot to put it on before we get into the mailbag here. We'll switch a little bit of gears. Penguins are on a tear. 6-2-2, got 88 points, basically a lock for the playoffs at this point. So just whenever we were worried about them not making the playoffs, they go off. So any thoughts on that before we hit into the mailbag?
Yeah, got to eat a little bit of crow with the trade deadline move. Because the guy from Vancouver that we picked up that we thought really doesn't move the needle has just set the tone early. Got into a fight with Wilson and laid into him the other night, playing physical on the defensive end. It was a shot of exactly what I thought the Penguins needed. So hope they can keep it up.
And we saw what happened before on a cup run a couple years ago, making moves. I think it was a coaching move to get the team motivated. What that can do, get things started on the right direction right before playoffs are about to start. So I'm feeling confident. I think we're going to have another exciting playoff. How far we go, we'll see. But I'm going to switch into the mailbag now. We haven't had this on for a while for the show. We had some comments last week during the show, but just due to technical limitations, I wasn't able to get into them during the show. And a lot of it was just trash talk, talking about us being homers for college football teams and talking about the terrible GM moves, about $21 million in dead cap for the Steelers this year, because I think they kept Shazier on. But at that point, you're doing it for the good of the team in hopes that players all around the league see it and then they want to sign with you in free agency. You see it with the NBA all the time now. Players jump back and forth across teams to play with their friends. In the NFL, if you kind of do that, it's sort of like tampering. I think even in Major League Baseball, I think, was it Bryce Harper? Just said something about someone coming to play with him in Philly, and Major League Baseball was already investigating it. But in the NBA, they don't really have that, it seems. So you got to look at it from both sides. And someone else said that OBJ, he wants to win, and it wasn't about money. But if you're going with that route, why would you go to the Browns? That's not a winning squad. Are you kidding me? Just because everyone, and let's be honest, everyone's picking the Browns this year for the AFC North. That's the early predictions. Everyone all around. That's the trendy pick. But it was also the trendy pick the last 2 years about sneaking into the playoffs. You can make as many moves as you want, but that doesn't mean that they're going to pan out. So, any thoughts on that, Matt? Browns?
I've been one of those ones that just keep thinking eventually, if you keep throwing enough spaghetti, something will stick. I do think not only with the moves on the offensive side, but I think the defensive side, with boosting their defensive line, with some of the trades and free agency moves, they're pushing the chips in and they're going for it. You know, we talk about these teams that they sit on their hands year in and year out and don't really make a lot of moves. Unless you're New England, you're pretty much trying to make moves to get yourself into a spot to be competitive. So I think that they're doing all the right things. They're giving their quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield, some weapons. And I think with signing an offensive coach as their head coach and being able to keep some consistency on that side of the ball, I think you're still going to see the growth, and with the added weapons, it's going to make them that much more of a better team this year.
I think with that, it comes back to what everyone always talks about. It comes down to quarterback play. Can Baker Mayfield be that guy? You can bring in all kind of weapons, but it's demoralizing if your quarterback is throwing interceptions late in the fourth quarter or can't hit receivers accurately. Remember Tim Tebow? A lot of receivers on that team were getting frustrated all game, and it seemed like he only turned it on in the fourth quarter. Got them a playoff win, but it was enough that the front office said, like, look, we can't keep doing this. You're not accurate enough in the game. We gave you the shot. Sure, you're winning games. And I was surprised another team didn't take a chance on him in hopes that the accuracy, that's the toughest thing to fix, though, I think. And I think a lot of college coaches make that mistake where they'll take a quarterback with a big arm thinking that they can teach accuracy, when I would much rather have an accurate quarterback and try to teach strength. That's just me. And I think I think Mike Leach, I honestly think he said something very similar this past year. So you have that with the Browns. Can that happen? Or is it going to be another situation like that where the team doesn't rally around them? And we'll see. Because, of course, New England, you rattled them off. They have Tom Brady. He's the greatest quarterback of all times. Steelers should be in that situation, too, with Ben Roethlisberger. Multiple Super Bowl winner. Now, a lot of people throw Aaron Rodgers' way, but realistically, he hasn't had the results Ben Roethlisberger has had. I think they're actually very similar in postseason the past couple years, because I compared Tomlin and their old coach statistically. But, of course, he only got it done one time and has flamed out ever since. Ben has 2 Super Bowl rings, so it's all about the quarterback position still. Let's get into, this is the one we hit on before in the fall. I think it was in the fall when the story broke. But there was a high school a high school coach in Georgia that was under investigation for, there were a couple like allegations thrown against him, and I'm going to have to put this out so that everyone can see it. But Rush Probst from, is it Colquitt County?
Yep.
I put it in the description here. He was basically fired, and they gave him 5 accounts. So it's 5 standards he violated in the Georgia Code of Ethics for Educators. One of the big ones was that he gave pills to students. Now, one coach came out, and I tried to do some research on this before the show. One of his assistant coaches came out, and a couple other people said they thought he was giving Advil or some type of pain reliever. Now, when this first came out, and let you talk here in a second, Matt, I erred on the side of the coach. I initially agreed with him because I know that a lot of small schools, they don't have budget to have trainers that are there every day. I know I came from a decently, it wasn't that small of a school, but you have a trainer that's done with every sport. They're not going to be at football practice every day. They're going to be there in and out, going from soccer to whatever. And so I thought, okay, it makes sense that maybe the coach here had to do that just to make sure that his guys were on the up and up. And you got to do what you got to do. But then I saw his salary. He was making 6 figures. If they were paying him 6 figures, that school probably has top-notch athletic facilities and top-notch trainers on staff. So, Matt, go ahead. And what are your thoughts on this whole situation?
The thing that stood out more than the charges, more than anything, was how open this investigation was. Usually when it comes to a high-profile case, because I believe Rush was the highest paid coach in Georgia. I was surprised to see that how much information they released, like showing like he owed like $300,000 in back taxes and another like 6 figures worth of state taxes were among the charges that they had. In addition to the stuff like you talked about giving, I think it was like a leave or like some kind of aspirin, ibuprofen type medication to students. I just don't know why you would, like, in what realm, unless like you're just making that kind of money for so long that like you don't even think like the legal ramifications. Because even with my position, and it's nowhere near 6 figures, I couldn't imagine giving kids any kind of medication, because everything is just so, the world we live in, the society we're in is so sue happy that you have to look at everything through tainted glasses and saying, how can this come back to not just bite me, but bite my family? And you'd hate to have that situation come up where if he had accidentally given kids some kind of medication and they had a reaction to it, he could be looking at not just being fired, but going to jail. Not worth it.
Yeah, you make a good point. When I played football, that was over a decade ago. More like, 15 years? Something like that. So there wasn't the internet, and there wasn't really social media. I mean, I guess there was the internet, but not the way you know it now. Everything was anonymous. So you really wouldn't have had that, and no kids even had phones at practice, really. So, I mean, you can get away with that stuff more when I played than you can now. And I think you're right. Like, you're looking at it, you're going to be recorded. It almost makes me feel like a couple schools, how they have handlers. We talked about it before for the NCAA. Why not just have a handler? You're the coach. I would assume the taxes. I try to get more information on that. But I would assume that the high school takes taxes out of their pay. So I would assume that is speaking engagements, because he's the number 1 coach in Georgia in high school. Other schools were probably paying him to put on football clinics, speak at different events, and over time, he probably just didn't pay taxes on it. And it took this investigation to uncover it, just because whenever you get like an audit like this, they look at your bank statements to see like, okay, well, how come you got this random $10,000 deposit like 3 or 4 times in the middle of June? for the last couple of years, last 20 years. And of course, if you don't report it, they don't know. But that's very easy with the paper trail now with your bank account. I would think that that's what that was from. There was one other one where he tried to make a hotel request on the school dime, which was just weird to me. Like, maybe he thought he was above the school procedures at this point, because he tried to block the firing or the hiring of a new principal or school administrator or something like that. And I wonder if he knew that there was going to be an issue with this person. That person's brought in. They probably told him, like, hey, don't do that anymore. I know you've been doing this for how many years, booking with the school account, but you can't book hotels like that for yourself. And he probably just thought, you know what, I'm just going to do it anyway. Like, what's going to happen? That's me trying to get in the mindset of the coach here. But it's looking like I can barely defend him at all. Well,
and some people might recognize him because when MTV did their Two-A-Days show around 2005, 2006, he was the coach at Hoover High in Alabama that had that MTV show. So if you're remembering that show, he was coaching there at the time and went from there to Colquitt County where he received a huge salary increase.
It's crazy. I mean, I don't know what else other coaches, like, they're set in their ways. You're not going to change. It has to be tough for a coach that's not used to all this stuff to suddenly have to do it.
Well, and I think the one thing, looking at his situation, if you're dealing with administrators who in the past have turned a blind eye or blatantly have just allowed you to say, yeah, just go ahead and just put that on the school credit card or whatever, and then suddenly have that change, I can see where that would cause some tension, where it was a benefit of something that in the past you were able to receive and now you're no longer getting that. I can kind of see where some of that comes from. But at the end of the day, if you're making that kind of money, I would think that you're probably erring on the side of caution with just about everything.
Yeah, and again, that's pure speculation on my point. I was trying to get in the mindset of the coach before we brought this in to try to think. Before, you weren't sure 100% what the investigation was. Now, knowing exactly how in-depth this went, it's kind of hard to agree with the coach here. I mean, even if you think he's giving a kid some Advils, you can never be sure because of how many schools now, and like even with the anonymous testing, a bunch of those Clemson players that got all pinched for the same exact performance-enhancing drug, and they all denied taking it on purpose. How do you know that you didn't get that from someone you trusted? So it's definitely tough out there.
Well, I'll take it a step further, and this was the one thing that I was really thinking about with it was what if it was potentially to hide a concussion-related thing, where a player has a potential concussion and you're saying, well, here, take this medicine instead. Maybe it's just a headache, and now you're complicating what potentially could be a concussion type situation and making that a lot worse.
And that's going to take us down the rabbit hole there. So
yeah,
you could be right, though. You never know that with the hot topic that is right now about concussions and headaches and not being able to play if you have a headache at all, you take that before you go to your evaluation. I don't know what other symptoms that could cover up, but you could be 100% right with that. Get guys back on the field if they're injured.
Because I would guarantee making that much money and being at that school where he did win at least one state championship, that the pressure's on and you have to win. Excuse me. But I can see where that pressure's on, that if you lose your star athlete for 3 or 4 games, that could, and you lose during that time that they're missing. Not saying that it's right, but the difference between are they concussed or can they continue playing, and salvaging a couple wins, could be enough of a motivation to try to push some over-the-counter medication.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's going to be interesting if there are other coaches that come up with something like this across the country. Because normally, if one high-profile coach goes down, there's investigations at smaller schools, especially in like even the NCAA, where they talk about, oh, NCAA was so mad at so-and-so's big school, they went after a small school for something different, or like the same thing almost. And then they penalize that one instead. But we'll see what comes of this across the countries, because highest paid coach in Georgia has to have ramifications across the state. But let's look at some more football stuff. Missouri, speaking of scandals and things, it's not really high school related, but we talked about this a while ago. They joined the SEC, and I had the numbers on this. I posted them here so that I had them for the show in my notes. It was, what did they have? Their actual attendance for 7 home games last year, 2018, was 24,377, which is roughly 47% of what the school reported in their game box scores. If you remember, back in the fall, there was a trending article, we hit about it on our show, from the New York Times, I believe, that talked about schools over-reporting attendance. Because there is a rule in the NCAA. If you don't have 15,000 people at all of your games for 2 years, you cannot be Division I. So like, let's say if the average over a 2-year period is 8,000, you would have to drop Division I football. So I don't know if the investigation from the New York Times was looking into that for some of these smaller schools that are now trying to make the jump, because it seems like there's been at least 10 schools over the past couple years that have tried to jump into Division I, whether they did it successfully or not. I think there's some more that are still coming, but you have to have that attendance number. Missouri, on the other hand, jumped into the SEC, immediately went to 2 SEC East champions. I guess they went into the SEC championship game as the East representative, because I definitely butchered that. But they go into there. You think they have some momentum. For whatever reason, they shoved them in the East. They could have been in the West. It benefited them because the East has been so horrid that they're able to get there. But now they have trouble with their head coach, and they have a whole situation with that. Then they have a whole political side on campus with protests and everything, so much to the point that their one dorm wasn't full, so they were renting it out as a hotel for football games, which now, looking at these attendance numbers, I don't even know if that was beneficial to them. So I think what happens and what you're seeing here is you're seeing a school that, for whatever reason, tried to make political statements and had issues with their head coach, and they thought that the fans wouldn't notice almost. And so now a lot of people are spinning it in the media that, hey, no, this is about the SEC. It's not paying off because they're not bringing in rivals of old. No, it's 100% not the SEC, because you're bringing in bigger opponents than what you would have in the Big 12. It has all the things to do with the way their coaching change was handled and all of the protests. I believe the football team was saying that they weren't even going to play, is I think what the statement was that they were trying to make. And what are you left with? You didn't shut it down from an administration standpoint, and now you're faking your attendance. And as soon as a story breaks, your cover to leak to the media is that some fans are not happy with the SEC. It just doesn't make sense to me. I want to get your thoughts on that, Matt.
I don't even know what to say to it. It's so bizarre that you try to pump up these ratings, and I definitely think it was a move that at the time, I think Missouri thought, well, we'll jump in, we'll reap the benefits of the TV deal and everything else. But I mean, they're just getting slammed with basically just being a bottom feeder. I mean, they appeared in the one SEC championship, but got throttled by Auburn.
I think it was 2. I'm trying to look it up right now just to see.
I know there was the one because it was the year Florida State beat Auburn, but Auburn beat they had the kick six against Alabama that put them in the SEC championship game, and then they beat Missouri to go to the national championship.
And I think they played Alabama once. Yeah, 2013, 2014, Gary Pinkel won the SEC East. He was their head coach, and then he was there with them through their entire run. Well, not the entire run of the Big 12. When did he start coaching there? He started at Missouri in 2001. Winning record, winning bowl record. He had a couple great years where they were almost in the national championship game.
Yes.
Was it Chase Daniels?
Yep.
So you have that, and you're going in, and then all of a sudden, he gets pushed out. I'm trying to see if this Wikipedia has the reason. I honestly can't remember. But you have that, he gets pushed out, and then they can't fill it back in. So they were fine with the SEC as soon as they got in. Their basketball team was successful, but you can't let your athletics department eat itself alive. It's almost like when Maryland was in the ACC. They ran their program into the black so much that they thought they might have to cut programs. Then they jumped to the Big Ten for financial reasons, and you still have some fans saying, well, I wish we were still in the ACC. We would be more competitive there. After the ACC, or after Maryland wins, they win like lacrosse and a couple other sports, soccer maybe, in the Big Ten, but they haven't competed in basketball. They have, out of all the schools in the Big Ten, Maryland has the worst record in the Big Ten tournament all time. Like, you couldn't have guessed that. They got brought in the same time as Rutgers. Rutgers has a better record in the Big Ten tournament, and Maryland was brought in for basketball reasons. Football, they haven't done anything. So, of course, their fans are going to be upset. I think Missouri, they thought they were going to capitalize on their early success, but then you had Georgia come back, and you have Florida in the middle of a resurgence now, and it's going to be a little bit tougher because you're all the way out in the West, and it's going to hurt your recruiting. At first, it might have been easy to recruit because it was a new thing. Hey, we're in the SEC, we can get some Texas kids to jump up here, but your whole recruiting base was in the Midwest and Texas, and now you're playing games in Florida and Georgia and South Carolina, all these East Coast teams. You're going to lose that over time. Once the initial hype wears off, you start to go down, and I think that's what their issue is. But I don't know. I feel bad that a lot of their fans now are in the middle of this, and it looks like it might have been due to the protest with the players, because it says Missouri football coach Gary Pinkel has sided with his players during their protest against a school president. And I think that might have been the reason that he was actually pushed out. So you push out, basically in Big 12 terms, you're Bill Snyder, a winning coach. Maybe he didn't win a national championship, but he was winning at a high level, especially if you're winning in the SEC. I don't care what division you're in. It's almost like when Arkansas pushed out Bobby Petrino. You push out the coach for some questionable off-field stuff. Does it really affect the program that much? Yes, it does when you fire him. And you proceed to go 0-11 or whatever that happened to Arkansas after that. No one knows, because no one knows where Arkansas is. They haven't built that back up. So it's a thin line. If you're these programs and you start to worry about your public image, it's the same thing. We had a question come through. I didn't bring it up in the mailbag, but someone had asked me, what do you think of the Kareem Hunt suspension? Off the field, he didn't get charged with, what was it, hitting and kicking a female. At that point, he got 8 games. What do you do with it? I mean, football is basically his job. If he was working any other job in America, would he have been suspended for 8 weeks after that? No, he wouldn't. You're either going to fire him or you're not. You don't get suspension. I mean, even like some careers you would, like if you're a cop and you're under investigation, you're suspended for a certain amount of time as they do the investigation. But for Hunt, the investigation is over. No charge. I would assume you're back at work, or they would have fired you a long time ago like the Chiefs did. Chiefs fired him. Browns decided, hey, we're going to take a shot on him. I don't think the NFL should step in there. Same with coaches. You're going to fire him. You fire Bobby Petrino. I'll go back to Petrino because he obviously bombed at Louisville the second time. But for Arkansas there, he was on top of the world. You fire him for a motorcycle accident, and there might have been subordinate stuff with a volleyball coach or something. I can't remember what it was. I don't even know if it officially came out that that's what it was or not. And they fired him. And what happened? They tanked after that. So you got to kind of weigh the positives. What's going to happen? A coach siding with his players, you don't side with the coach. You deserve what happens to you, I would think. You're a coach, what would you think? You're going to side with your players, right?
Absolutely. And until you get the evidence that proves, that they're in the wrong. But at that point, there should be some level of established rules or routines that if something like that were to come up, here's what the consequences are. And I think the NFL is starting to establish that. We've been in the past very hard on the NFL for being inconsistent, but I think universally now the standard is if you get caught with any kind of domestic violence issues, you're gonna get dinged for it. I mean, shortly after at the end of the season, Tyreek Hill was released by the Chiefs for some domestic violence stuff. So I mean, they're just showing that they're not putting up with it. And I know the argument on the player side is that you're taking a lot of these players who are coming from poverty, low income backgrounds where physical discipline is the way that they're growing up and being raised, and as they're getting bigger, they're using those same tactics with their own families, and it's causing some of the issues that we're seeing. It's happening now on a much bigger stage that it has to be dealt with.
And I'm not really sure what they can do consistency wise. The other one we talked about was Robert Kraft. He got caught at was it a massage parlor?
Down in Florida.
Asian Springs or something down in Florida during an FBI raid. And is the NFL going to do anything to him? No. I would be shocked if they did something. I was shocked when Donald Sterling got forced to sell the Clippers. And I still wonder in the back of my head if that wasn't a setup to get him to sell the team for billions of dollars. Like if that was his way to drive up interest in the team.
I'm curious to see with what they're going to do with Robert Kraft, though, because with the way that they manipulated his deal, it's kind of worded interestingly that the Florida prosecutors are willing to drop the charges, but he has to admit that they would have been proven guilty if it was taken to court. Now, when his handlers released all this information, whenever all the charges were first brought up, he said he had nothing to do with it. It was a wrong place, wrong time situation. And if he really was innocent in all of it, then you would think that he'd be willing to go toe-to-toe, spend the money, fight the battle in court, and prove his innocence. But if he's willing to take the lesser penalty, lesser crime, he's got to admit that they would have found enough evidence to prove him guilty.
Well, I'll say this, Matt. You think, is it going to be worth it for him to fight it? Because his name's going to be drugged down if he's fighting it for years. And if he comes out clean, no one's going to remember. Because he'll be in the news for almost a year or two until it's finally all settled in the massage sex scandal. They're going to put it in every headline. By bowing out now, even if he's guilty, what does that mean? It goes on his record?
Al Davis would fight it. He fought the NFL for 2 decades. He doesn't care. He's a winner.
Yeah, but this is like you're fighting the FBI. like to clear your name, and he's already a billionaire, because it already looks bad for him. This looked and was supposedly, I looked at the Google Maps, I looked at the photo to see the neighborhood it's in. It's not in the best neighborhood that you would think a billionaire owner would be. Why was he there? Why did he go to that massage parlor? It just seems odd that I would think that if you own an NFL team, most likely you're friends with a lot of rich people. And why not just go to a spa and golf course resort? To be honest, when I heard that they got busted, I thought that's where they were. Not at a strip mall massage parlor. They're like, I would have barely been able to try to get, like if I was trying to get a girlfriend in like high school on massage, like that's where you would buy one, because you can get like 2 for $20 coupons or something. Not like, oh, hey, Robert Kraft, don't you own the Patriots? Like, hey, what are you doing over here? Like, it just didn't make sense to me that you would be at that place. And sure, it could have been a coincidence. Maybe he thought that if he was there, people wouldn't recognize him. I don't know. But it's all speculation. And if he takes the deal, which I'm assuming he's going to, if he didn't already, I don't know what that proves. Like, I don't know if that proves he's guilty or not.
But I think the other point to that, with what you were saying, is that even if the NFL would step it up, and I think you're right. I think as an owner, they're not going to push the issue. But if they did, he would just turn it over to his son, and so behind the scenes, he'd still be making the moves and doing all of the puppeteering. It'd just be a different name in charge.
Well, so, I used Donald Sterling for the NBA, but what about Jerry Richardson in Carolina? I don't know if he had any kids, but he was kind of forced to sell the team because of issues of, I forget what it was, like sexism or something they were saying. So you had racism. So you have that, and what are you going to do? If the NFL wants you out, I guess they can force you out. Like, I don't know what would happen if he would decide and say, you know what, I'm going to fight it. Like, what are you going to do? Not schedule the Patriots? I don't know what the rules are in place, but could you imagine if the NFL were like, hey, you can't own the team. He said, I'm not going to sell. And they were like, well, you have to, or we're not going to play you. And he says, you know what? I'm going to rule my Tom Brady-led Patriots into the XFL. Like, what would the NFL do? They would be crapping their pants because they would be like, oh my God, we lost Tom Brady. And they're going to be in the XFL, which everyone's going to watch.
They wouldn't even miss a beat. They wouldn't even. We're not talking in his prime Tom Brady. We're talking twilight years of his career.
Matt, it would be hilarious to see if it brought two leagues together, though. I think it could. I think that would be the way to get minor league football to not be minor league football anymore.
Yeah, nothing like taking an old, on his last legs quarterback and trotting him out to the XFL.
On his last legs? I remember him winning Super Bowls all the time, Matt.
Yes, with their defensive coach game planning to shut down one of the highest ranked offenses in the NFL.
All I remember is him just throwing touchdown passes, Matt.
A touchdown pass.
I'm sure there were a few.
A few? Take your Michigan glasses off. It was like 7-6 in the fourth quarter. Matt, and it was a running play. It was a rushing touchdown.
You grew up watching the Steelers. You know you don't have to score touchdowns to win games. You just need to be able to get in field goal range and milk the clock.
There is some truth to that.
All right, let's switch gears. We were like going down all kinds of scandal holes today. Let's get into the NCAA tournament. I know you were bitter because they put your Noles back in what I consider the best regional. Gonzaga, Michigan, we're back in it. They put Florida in it this time. It looks like it's going to be another fun year. What do you think on that bracket pick?
It just pissed me off because you have the runner-up from the ACC that knocked off one seed Virginia in the process, that played tough with Duke through the championship game, and Purdue's ahead of you? Are you fucking kidding me? fucking Purdue. They beat Purdue heads up. They beat 3 teams that Purdue lost to, and Purdue gets a higher seed. Are you out of your mind? Florida State is a top 10 team in America right now and is a 4 seed in the tournament. Like, do you realize how stupid that is? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Well, Matt, I had some complaints with the whole process because they weren't clear. So they paid billions of dollars or whatever, millions of dollars for these net rankings, which kind of aligned with the computer rankings. And then they didn't even use them. They can say that they did, but if you look at NC State was ranked like 30th in the rankings. In years past for RPI, any team that's around 60, like Syracuse was a few years ago, they were making every excuse possible to bend over backwards to get them in. This year, NC State looks like a clear shoe-in. What happens? NIT. They're not even a number 1 seed in the NIT, and they have the best computer rankings and all the fancy stats. Have them as number 1.
They weren't even the best North Carolina team in the NIT. UNC Greensboro got a higher seed than them.
I know. It's hilarious because you put the money in. Are you going to use these? Nah, let's go back. I saw ESPN put their staff picks Elite 8. It was the top 8 seeds. Like, it was all 1 and 2s for their predicted Elite 8. Like, what kind of brain dead moron do you have to be to sit down and say, oh, you know what? This has never happened ever, that all the top 8 seeds advance, but I'm going to pick them anyway and put it on our primetime bracket. Like, hey, if you're picking your bracket, just pick these number 1 and 2 seeds all the way through. I saw a screenshot of it, so I know that I don't know what they did after that. But it's just crazy that you're putting all this stuff in, but you just went back to the old names. Tell me why, and you're right with Purdue. I've been ragging on them all year long. They got a tie of the Big Ten tournament, or the Big Ten title, regular season, because they had a weak schedule. You can't knock NC State because of they're out of conference or whatever. I get that. But sometimes you have the pre-tournament selections and those little like preseason tournaments. They don't get picked for that. Because they're always doing like Battle for Atlantis. Let's play on a U.S. carrier, but let's only invite UNC, Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, UCLA, Michigan State. Like, let's only invite those couple teams. How can another school build up their non-conference if that's what you have? I mean, they're scheduled years in advance, just like football. You don't know if a team's going to be down or if they're going to be up. And then you have games with these pre-tournament things. And then you have the fake rivalries like the Big Ten ACC Challenge, which is where Florida State beat Purdue. What is the point of that if that doesn't matter? Because you can't tell me in that tournament, Matt, you were saying about like number 1 seeds and whatever, you have Michigan State, I forget what they did, but Michigan destroyed North Carolina. Destroyed them. Double digits, it wasn't even a game in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. They have about the same record as Michigan. I thought for sure Michigan State was going to get a 1 seed. Instead, they got completely screwed. And they are in Duke's bracket in what I consider possibly the worst 2 seed you could have. They swept Michigan in the regular season, 2 games. They beat them on Sunday right before the tournament was picked. You would think that I thought, let's be honest, whoever is in Gonzaga and Virginia's bracket, that's the easier bracket, the easier number 1. That's where the 2 seed, the highest 2 seed should go. But instead, the committee put Michigan State in Duke's bracket because they don't care. They don't care. You can't tell me Virginia deserves another number 1 seed after last year. The only team ever to lose to a 16 seed. What did they do this year? You're right, Matt. They lost in their ACC tournament. I called that on the show. Purdue and Virginia are going to choke. And they both choked.
And I don't see how you get knocked out early in your conference tournament and you still maintain your number 1 seed.
Well, you almost have to be undefeated at that point. Like, I could see Gonzaga, they lost in the championship game to a team that they throttled early.
Absolutely. And just like had Florida State pulled the upset off and beat Duke with Zion, well, I mean, Zion is just he's in a whole nother planet of play right now. That Duke's a one, absolutely. There's no one's going to argue that. I do have an issue with a team like Virginia that is so spotty and inconsistent that. How do you justify? I feel like they got the Georgia treatment. They play in the ACC and they're battling with Duke and North Carolina, so they're going to get that. They get the 1 seed just because of the conference. And I feel like because they put them in the 1, it hurt Florida State seeding. Who, and I'm not saying that they're going to run, they're going to make a run and win it all, but definitely they got put in a spot where it's going to be a tougher road for them to battle to make a deep run into the playoffs.
And I'll say this, I agree. I don't think when you're talking about the ACC bias, there's no reason the ACC should have 3 number 1 seeds. There just isn't. That happened with the Big East before, and I don't think any of those teams got to the Final Four. It's looking like right now the ACC, Zion right now is the redeeming quality for those picks. Is he going to lead Duke to a Final Four? Because otherwise, I don't think the ACC had a Final Four team last year after the Virginia choke job. I know it was Michigan, like Chicago, Loyola, and Villanova, and then whatever team Villanova beat. So it could have been an ACC team. I don't remember. I think it was Kansas, though. So you're looking at that. You look at the Big Ten ACC Challenge where they're equal with the Big Ten. How can you honestly say that the ACC was head and shoulders better? What is the point of that challenge? What is the point of, you can't sit down and say, okay, well, Michigan played UNC, we're going to throw that one out. We're just going to throw that one out because reasons. But then you have Michigan State, who was playing hurt all year. They finally are getting guys back now. They go on a tear, and over the last 2 weeks beat Michigan 3 times. Michigan was undefeated in the non-conference. Why is Michigan State getting penalized? Like, I don't understand why they got penalized, or I understand Tennessee lost to Auburn. I think that was in the SEC championship game. But why not split them up with the top conferences? Could you imagine if like this was the college football playoffs and they said, you know what? We're going to put 3 SEC teams in. And then everyone else is going to play in the BCS bowls. Everyone would go nuts.
Yeah.
And you could even take it a step further and say, what if it was not even a conference that was in the playoffs like last year? What if next year the committee said, you know what? USC got a new coach. Like, they had all this stuff going on there with their admission scandal. What if they were like, you know what? We're bringing in some hot coach right now. And they put 3 Pac-12 teams in the playoffs next year. Everyone would be like, what the hell is going on? Like if it was Washington, Oregon, and USC. Just for no reason, because that's kind of what they did with the ACC this year. It just didn't, like, sure, Virginia and UNC, you guys did the ACC, but then you can't, on one hand, they're saying the ACC is awesome. But then on the other hand, they're saying, Florida State, though, and you played in the ACC, like, you didn't do that, like, you weren't that good. You're going to be a 4 seed. But because of UNC and Virginia playing there, they're definitely ones. And then NC State, you played in the ACC, that's not that good. So you're not even going to be in. And guess what? You're not even the number 1 seed in the NIT. Greensboro is way better than you. Like, that's almost like what they're saying. They're picking and choosing what teams they want to elevate and which ones they don't. And I think that comes from the conference. I think that with the draw for the Big Ten and the ACC, I honestly think the NCAA came to both schools and said, hey, what schools do you want on what side of the bracket? And for whatever reason, I think the Big Ten split up Purdue from the 2 Michigan schools. Because normally they take the top 2 teams, like Duke and UNC, and they put them on opposite sides of the bracket so that they don't meet until the national championship. If you go back through the brackets, I think most of the time it's made up like that. But this year, they put Michigan and Michigan State on the same side of the bracket. And they put Purdue as the 3 on that complete other side. And they put Ohio State, I think, is in the one bracket with Michigan. I could be wrong. And then Maryland's in the one with Michigan State. So whoever's in charge of the Big Ten, they're just going to eat each other alive because all their teams are going to meet before they even have a chance to go. But the ACC is nice and cushy. They have all 4 of their schools in the different regionals. Florida State in the West, Duke in the East, was it Virginia in the Midwest, and then or North Carolina in the South. So, I don't know. I was a little bitter over that just because it doesn't make sense and it's almost becoming a sham. And I knew you were upset for the same reason, Matt. They're taking the ACC. It's beneficial to some teams, but not others. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I'd rather just keep it consistent. I don't think. Does the ACC have some good basketball teams? Yeah. Are they collectively better than the rest of all of the NCAA? No. That's insane to think. Just like I would be pissed off if you said, you go back to and listen to our playoff talk to try to justify having 3 SEC schools. My brain would have exploded had they've justified pushing 3 SEC schools in. It's stupid to think that way, and I think it's a slap in the face to every other conference. When you look at justifying that with the ACC, it's like if you're going to have that many teams be your number 1 seeds, well then why play? Just put them in your Final Four and just let them just play for the Duke's your national champion because they won the ACC. They won the toughest conference, so they automatically get a final bid and let all the other slappies play it out.
Well, I don't even care about the conference affiliation, if I'm being honest. I think if they're going to go with the computers, go with the computers. Don't change it. If it says Florida State's a top 10 team, why aren't they a top 3 seed? If NC State's a ranked 30th, why are they not in? And you're putting some of these other questionable schools like Arizona State in? I think Oregon won the Pac-12. Why is Arizona State in? If you looked at the non-conference and the Pac-12 got destroyed in the non-conference, who cares if they won in conference? Like, I could see if the ACC, if all those schools just kicked ass in the non-conference and they were all undefeated and they crushed in the Big Ten ACC Challenge and it was like 14-0 or even like 12-2 or something crazy like that. But I think it was a tie this year. I could be wrong. Maybe it was better than that. I think the Florida State-Purdue game was the tying game. If Purdue would have won that game, the Big Ten would have won. I think is how it broke down this year. So it's not like they're head and shoulders above by the fact that they're all ranked high. You're just discounting all these other conferences. And to me, it just doesn't make sense. Go with the computers. Like, I want them to bring back the BCS model for college football because you had 12 different computer models and you take the average. Throw out the extremes, take the average. And I think that's what they should do with the basketball. Because right now, everyone knows the sport is fake. Players are getting paid. It's out there. FBI already said that they were. Nothing has happened. If it was football, teams would have already been suspended. Like, let's be honest. They would have came after schools if it was football. But because basketball in the NCAA tournament gives them a bunch of publicity, they're going to eat it up and they're going to pretend like it never happened. So I'm loving it. I wish Florida State and Michigan were in opposite regional so that they could go far. Because I think the more football-focused schools that go far in the NCAA tournament just hurts their credibility of these great basketball institutions. So let's pull for some upsets. Let's go with our last couple things. Orlando Apollos, they finally lost to, was it San Antonio? It's like a 3-3 squad, I believe. I can't remember now. And it seems like they're still...
No, it was Arizona that they lost to.
Was it Arizona? I know it was less than a touchdown.
It was Neuheisel's, the hot shots. So
you have what should be a compelling race leading up. I think Birmingham won. Again, they're 4-2. Orlando's 5-1 leading in the East here. And you're coming in to a complete slugfest in the West. I think all the teams are right there, are kind of still in it leading into, this is going to be week 7? Trying to do math in my head on the show is never good. I think it's week 7. So they have about 4 weeks left, 4 games left. And I think this is when they really need to promote it. Ratings are still down on the NFL Network. And I honestly think that's because a lot of people don't pay the extra money for the NFL Network because it's not football season. I think that was the worst decision they could have made. But we'll see how these games do leading into the NCAA basketball tournament over the next 2 weeks. I think they're on TNT this week. I could be wrong. And I think CBS Maine even picked one up leading into one of the NCAA tournament games later in the tournament, like the Elite Eight or Final Four or something. So keep an eye on for that because we definitely want some more football. And if you want a reason to watch, Johnny Football, Johnny Manziel, is going back to the AAF. How do you think he's going to fare there, Matt?
Well, I think he's going to be an upgrade over what they currently have. I don't think it's going to hurt. I am surprised, though, that they gave him another shot. You know, that he gets a crack at it. And I went back and forth because I was like, is it a Manziel gets special treatment? And the more I thought about it, no. He's just willing to play. And Colin Kaepernick had the same opportunity, and he demanded more money than what was being offered. He thinks he's above what they're willing to pay the players to play in that league and to show what they can or can't do. So I give Manziel credit that even though he hasn't really shown that he could be a top-tier quarterback, at least he's willing to try and to put it out there. So I think if he's going to flame out, that's going to be the place he's going to flame out at.
I can't knock him for trying either because I said that was my blueprint of how the AAF could be better. Bring in quarterbacks that people have heard of. Not these guys that I don't know any of them besides Hackenberg, and he's not even a quarterback anymore. I guess I know Aaron Murray too. But he's going to, I think Manziel signed with Hackenberg's team, right? Memphis?
Yes.
So they were awful. Why not give him a shot? Have a named quarterback come in. I joked last week about someone should sign Tim Tebow because I saw the Mets demoted him to AAA or whatever they were doing. Why not? Have him come in for the last 2 weeks and shift to like a power running quarterback with like the tight end pop pass the whole time. I mean, these coaches are so old, you know that they would love that style of offense. Why not? So I want to see Manziel come in. I'm worried that he's not up to football speed. I'm worried that he's not in shape. And I'm also worried that he still doesn't have his life together. This could be his last shot ever. The CFL basically fired him. And I don't know what other quarterbacks, like you said, Matt. Give him credit. He is willing to play. I named a ton of big-name quarterbacks from the past decade or so. And are any of them willing to show up? Not likely. So you need a quarterback that can draw people in and that is also going to show up and try to work hard and live up to the hype that they used to have. I mean, you can go back through the Heisman winner quarterbacks or even the Heisman selection and get quarterbacks that were in the top 5, and they have to be willing to quit their job and or move to play football at this level. So he did it. I give him props. If it works out or not, I don't know, but I got to give the guy credit for trying. I think that pretty much wraps up our big topics. Do you have anything for the final bell this week, Matt?
I just looked at Pittsburgh and just give, for as much as typically they don't put them, so they don't spend in free agencies, I thought they made a couple smart moves. They signed Rams linebacker Mark Barron to a 2-year deal. They restructured Vince Williams' deal, gave him some more money, and locked him in for a bit longer, and they signed Dante Moncrief from the Colts. So I think they're not headline moves. They're not the flashiest moves, but I think they're guys who have come from successful teams that hopefully are going to bring that veteran leadership that is so desperately needed right now. I think the bottom line is that I feel like at this point they've eliminated enough headaches that Tomlin has to be feeling the heat, and that I think like when you say that there were cancers with Brown and with Bell, well, you got rid of them. So now all the distractions, all of the excuses are gone. It's now on you to make this work and make this your team.
Preach, because I never even brought that in yet. But you're right. That was going to be my Steelers preview in the fall, and if I don't forget about it. But this is all on Tomlin now. You had the scapegoats. Both of them are gone. He probably thought he still had Brown causing distractions in the fall this year. So now he has to be going crazy thinking that, wow, this is on my team. Get the locker room together. Get the locker room together, because at this point, me as a fan personally, I'm looking at the team. I know Ben Roethlisberger's career is coming to a close. I would come to him and say, hey, do you feel comfortable, Tomlin, getting you to that next step? If Ben says no, bring someone else in at this point. I mean, it's kind of late in the game to get a new coach.
Well, let me ask you this. If you're Ben Roethlisberger, why play this upcoming year?
Because this is the last year. He only has like 2 years left. He could be rubber arming Peyton Manning style in like 6 months. We don't know. He's not in the best of shape, Matt.
The only reason that I say this is because with all the former players that are throwing him under the bus right now, you had the running back that was saying, oh, yeah, he was mad at Haley and fumbled intentionally. And it's like, I feel like he's just getting, like, Roethlisberger's just under the gun right now of like, oh, he's a bad teammate, he's a bad leader, he's this, he's that. All he's done is consistently played quarterback and made the team better. Usually you want more out of your quarterback, but if that's not who he is, then there were other guys that fit that role, the Palomalus, the Bettises, the Wards, that did handle the leadership aspect that Ben didn't have to. And, if they're not happy with it, at the point that I feel like he's at is just to say, piss off and see how good you can be without me. Because he has 2 Super Bowl rings to his name, and a lot of these guys wouldn't have any rings if it weren't for him, because you saw what it was like before he got there. And if he were to retire right now, they would be screwed. They would absolutely be screwed.
First off, you say that like it was a bad thing, the Tommy Gun era. I love that era.
It was brief. And I don't think they gave him enough time.
But I still loved it as a fan. And then Roethlisberger came in, and you're like, okay, I knew this guy was good in college. I remember watching him play Iowa and almost upsetting an Iowa team that I think that was the year Brad Banks led them 11-1, 11-2. I think that whatever their final record ended up being, Roethlisberger almost upset them from Miami, Ohio, and thinking, oh, that kid's pretty good when the Steelers drafted him, and everyone was high on him, but they weren't saying he was like a overall number 1. Takes him a little bit of time. He's not the best with off-the-field issues, but wins a couple games, and now he just keeps winning, throwing records. He has control of the offense. No one ever pumps him up like they did with Peyton Manning and his offense, and how, oh, look at Ben Roethlisberger making all these moves. They're always like, well, he's bumbling around back there. Or look at him. Oh, yeah, he's just so big they can't tackle him. That's why he's able to make that throw.
But you know what? That was always early in his career was like, what is he doing? But when you play as long as he has, and that's just the way that he plays, like that just is part of who he is. Like, is he going to throw 3 interceptions? Yes. Are there times that then in the fourth quarter he's going to throw an 80-yard touchdown pass for in between 5 defenders? Yes. So you live by the sword and you die by the sword, and I think that Pittsburgh's benefited from having him there.
And you're right. And that's why it's so important this year to see what happens, because this could be the beginning of the end. I mean, most likely it is. You're watching the end of an era, and that's why I don't care. Bring in some veterans like you did. Great. Bring them in, because you need that as a next step as a franchise. You need these younger guys. Keep drafting. Draft all young guys and start to do that rebuild while Ben is still there, and take advantage of it. I think that's what you need to do, and that's what I hope they do. Anything else for the final, Bill?
No, that was my big hitter. Was just surprising that. Well, I'll say this, and in a twist of fate with the old Raiders, signed Vontaze Burfict. So with all the issues that him and Brown had, Raider Nation just bringing two people that had an angry past together. So a love story developing in Oakland.
Maybe they're thinking that if you bring two cancers together, it will equal out.
Or they'll just kill each other, and they'll save on the cap space.
I don't even know what to say, but check out our website. It's up, southboundsports.com. Have all the shows there for you to download. I know I should have put this plug at the top of the show, but we're getting around to some of that stuff. All the content's there. I have all the feeds now pointed at the new feed, so hopefully you didn't have any issues with that. If you did, you might have to resubscribe, but you can go to southboundsports.com. I'm going to make the link pretty prominent over the next week or so that you can subscribe so you can tell your friends. You can also see the show notes from each week if you don't watch the live show because they're posted on Facebook as we do them. And I'll try to expand them. And if you want to leave any comments, we have that stuff set up too. So thanks for listening. Anything you want us to talk about, feel free to comment there. Or
and go to the store.
Yeah, go to the store, get some stuff, and we'll be back next week. So thank you.